Hi, I'm David Elder, and I'm excited to be here as a wealth manager and partner at Merit Financial Advisors. We're here to talk about transitions, and a lot of that has to do with the niche market that me and several of my colleagues work in, and that so many people are going through transitions right now at the company of AT&T. We're also going to talk about a formula that can work through almost any of life's transitions. I would recommend you use this for the most important transitions, as it might be a little thorough for some smaller ones, but I think it works across the board. And in fact, I'll remind you at the end of this video why I personally need to remember these 5 steps. So if we think about transitions, one of the first things we need to think about is, what is the change? What is the transition? Is it a job loss, some type of change in health care? Maybe a retirement, some type of family change like a marriage, divorce, birth of a child, birth of a grandchild, all these things that might make an impact on your plan. And so the first thing we need to do, regardless of where we're going, is get organized. Do a personal inventory on what we're working with. And I put a question mark next to that because that's the first thing your financial advisor should ask you is, what are we working with? Tell me about the income you need. Tell me about your situation from a risk standpoint. Tell me about your balance sheet. Once we do that, we can then talk about some other things logically, and let's just go through some simple transitions. If it's a transition such as possibly being downsized or losing a job, that's one thing. If it's a transition like moving into an assisted living home after being retired for 10 to 15 years, that's a very different thing. Lots of different people we need to talk to, lots of different processes we need to take for both what you're paying and how we're going to manage handling those resources. So now, if we get organized, regardless of the transition, we need to do a logical inventory. And I'm going to call that logical planning. This is a fantastic step for figuring out if these resources can work for what you're trying to achieve. However, one thing you need to remember is what may be more important, certainly to not derailing the plan over a long period of time, is emotional planning. And I know my mom will be the first to say I need to work on my handwriting, but the content is still there. And the emotional planning is things like, am I ready for retirement? Am I ready to make this change in my life? Am I ready to have a new baby? How am I emotionally going to handle this grandchild? How am I emotionally going to go through possibly a job change? And when you put these all together, we can make a lot of sense. But if we skip 1 or 2 of these steps, it can really derail the entire process. So if you think about it, we got to decide, what do we have? Where are we going? How do we feel about it? The next thing we have to do is start approaching the situation from what is about the change. And as soon as we know that, we can start coming up with things like how to handle health care. Do I continue my HSA at a new job, or am I ineligible for that? Do I, at 65, for example, which is a transition whether you're working or not, do I go on Medicare or not go on Medicare and continue paying to my HSA? Also, other transitions such as, am I 73 now? How am I going to handle my RMDs, and how does that impact my charitable giving? These are all very big decisions and very big changes that don't make that big of a difference a year or 2 ahead of time, but they make a significant difference once you get there. And so once we do that, we can then come back to the 4th step, which is incredibly important. How are we going to implement this? What are we going to do? And one thing I will tell you that I think is very important, and I tell all of our clients this at various times in the relationship with them, are we making a financial plan, or are we doing financial planning? And the difference in my mind is a financial plan is a very static document or moment where we say, given everything we have organized, here's what the future will look like. In reality, though, the second you walk out of our office, the market moves, inflation changes, your family changes a little bit, politics change, so many things. What we find is the world has changed, but our assumptions haven't. And so over time, that can cause some harm here that derails the plan. And so what we have to do is go back to it and decide we implemented what we want, or maybe we did not, and maybe we need to implement something else. But the fifth step on any type of change is progress. And you have to come back and track the progress just to know if you're on the right track. And so if we go through all 5 of these steps, once you're organized, we've intellectually put everything together that you have as a resource to deal with this situation. We've logically made a plan about it. We've made sure we're able to execute it. We decided what to implement, and then we track progress. I think we can change almost anything in the world. And I'm going to give you a really silly and small example. I know I need to get in better shape, but I hate working out. I hate going to gyms. However, if I organize the resources I have, I can come up with the things I do like. I can come up with a logical commitment. And then I can go back and say, am I emotionally invested in this? Am I going to keep this up? Because if that step isn't taken care of, I'll fade out after a month or 2. If all those 3 align, I can implement something. And then, as we all do with any type of project, I need to track my own progress. And I hope you can do the same. I hope this helps your finances. I also know that we're here to help even the most successful people we know prevent regrets. Because so many of us have things in our lives that our money could have done had we just planned for it. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.